I want to start this off with something my mom said to me last year, because it's been echoing in my head ever since. We raised you. You wouldn't even have that house if it weren't for us. That sentence, said with such confidence and finality, is the heart of everything that's been happening between me and my parents. For context, I'm 32, married, and we have one kid, my daughter, Lily, who's 4. My husband and I both work full-time jobs. We've been really careful with money, and we managed to buy a modest but comfortable 3-bedroom house just outside of our city. It's not fancy, but it's ours. My parents, on the other hand, have always lived paycheck to paycheck. Growing up, we didn't have much, and they made it clear that kids owe their parents everything. That was drilled into me my entire life. My dad worked factory jobs, my mom did part-time retail, and they never saved much for the future. When they retired earlier this year, they told me and my younger brother, Jake, he's 28 and still renting a tiny apartment downtown, that their plan was to move in with me until they got settled. Except there was no getting settled. They decided their retirement plan was to live with me permanently. They never asked. They just announced it. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with them, my mom sipping tea like it was the most normal conversation in the world, while she said, "Since we're done working now, we'll be moving in with you. It makes the most sense. You've got the house, the space, and Lily would benefit from having her grandparents around." I laughed at first, because I thought she was joking, but then I looked at her face. She wasn't joking. Neither was my dad, who just nodded like this had already been decided years ago. I said, "Wait, what? You're serious? You can't just move in with us." And that's when the whole storm started. They acted shocked. My mom gasped like I'd slapped her. My dad leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said, "We raised you. Now it's your turn to take care of us." That was the moment I realized they genuinely believed this was my obligation. I told them no. I told them my house was already full. Me, my husband, our daughter, plus we're both working, and we don't have the space or the money to suddenly become caretakers. But they didn't care. They started guilt-tripping me immediately. "We sacrificed everything for you. Other kids would be grateful to have their parents around. We won't survive on our pensions alone." The thing is, I love my parents, but I also know them. They're not easy people to live with. My dad is stubborn and messy. My mom is controlling and criticizes everything. When I was a teenager, I counted the days until I could move out. And now, they expect me to let them move back in indefinitely, with my husband and child in the middle of it? I stood firm that night. I told them, "No, I'm sorry, but that's not happening." They left angry. My mom wouldn't even look at me. That was 6 months ago, and since then, things have only gotten worse. Because now, the rest of my family has gotten involved. My aunts, uncles, even Jake, and suddenly, I'm the selfish one. The fallout didn't take long. About a week after that dinner, my phone started blowing up. First it was my mom, leaving long voicemails about how heartbroken she was. Then my dad, whose tone was less heartbroken and more, "You've betrayed the family." But what really got to me was when Jake called. Now, my relationship with Jake has always been a little complicated. We're close in the sense that we grew up together, went through the same struggles, but we're also very different people. He's more easygoing, more willing to go along with what my parents say. I've always been the one to push back. So when he called, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd get where I was coming from. Instead, the first thing out of his mouth was, "Why are you doing this to Mom and Dad?" I was standing in the kitchen when he said that, my phone pressed to my ear, staring out the window at Lily playing in the yard with her bubble wand. The air felt heavy, like even the sunshine couldn't cut through the guilt crawling over my skin. "Doing what to them?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Jake sighed. "They don't have anywhere else to go. You know they can't afford rent. They're not in good health. You have a house, you have space. Why would you even say no?" I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Because it's not that simple, Jake. We don't have space. We have 3 bedrooms, one for me and Mark, one for Lily, and a small guest room that's basically my office. Where exactly are Mom and Dad supposed to go? And even if we squeeze them in, living with them would make all of us miserable." "Come on," he said, his tone turning frustrated. "It's not about being comfortable. They need us. Don't you think we owe them?" There it was again, that word. Oh, that's the word that's been haunting me since this whole thing started. Because yes, they raised us. But they didn't do it out of charity. They did it because they chose to have kids. And yet, every time I try to explain that, I sound like the coldest person alive. I don't think I owe them my home, Jake, I said quietly. I've worked hard for this. So has Mark. And it's not fair to just bulldoze our lives because they didn't plan for theirs. There was a long silence. Then Jake said something that nearly made me drop the phone. Well, then maybe you shouldn't expect me to have your back when they cut you out of the family. That sentence stung in a way I can't even describe. My little brother, the kid I used to sneak Pop-Tarts to when Mom wouldn't buy snacks, the kid I helped with homework when Dad was yelling, was basically saying he'd side with them no matter what. I think I mumbled something about needing to go, then hung up. When Mark came home that night, I unloaded everything on him. He listened patiently, nodding, his face serious in that way he gets when he's already planning how to fix things. Finally, he said, "We need to set boundaries. Like, real ones. Otherwise, they're just going to keep pushing." The thing is, Mark has never liked the way my parents talk to me. He's polite to them, but after every visit, he always says, "They don't respect you." I usually brushed it off, but now, I couldn't deny it anymore. So, we decided to send a message, not just to my parents, but to the whole family. I drafted a long text explaining that while we loved Mom and Dad, we could not, and would not, have them move in with us. That we were willing to help them look at senior housing or explore options for budgeting their retirement income, but living with us was not on the table. I hit send, and then all hell broke loose. Within an hour, my Aunt Karen, who has always been the self-appointed matriarch of the family, replied, "Unbelievable. I never thought I'd see the day when you'd turn your back on your parents. Do you even know how lucky you are to have them still alive? Most people would kill to have this time with their mom and dad, and you're throwing it away." Then my uncle chimed in, saying maybe I'd gotten too big for my boots now that I had a house in the suburbs. Someone else said they felt sorry for my daughter because apparently she'll grow up without real family values. It was like being put on trial by my entire bloodline. And in the middle of all this, my parents? They were silent. Not one word from them in that group chat. Until 2 days later, when my mom finally called again. Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying. She said, "If you do this, we don't know where we'll go. Your father's talking about selling the car and living in it." I froze, because for the first time, it sounded like she wasn't just guilt-tripping me. It sounded like maybe they really had nowhere else to go. And that terrified me, because what if I was leaving them to fend for themselves? After that phone call, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying my mom's voice in my head, trembling as she said Dad was talking about living in the car. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was heartless, if I'd crossed some invisible line between setting boundaries and abandoning them. By 3 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I got up, padded into the living room, and pulled out my laptop. If my parents were really this desperate, I needed to know. There had to be options. Subsidized senior housing. Assistance programs. Something. Mark wandered out around 3:30, rubbing his eyes. "You okay?" I shrugged, eyes glued to the screen. "Just looking, trying to figure out if they really have nowhere else to go." He sat beside me, scanning the tabs I had open, government websites, local retirement communities, even Craigslist ads for apartments. After a while, he said, "See, they have choices. It's not like the only two options are move in with us or sleep in their car." But I shook my head. It's not that simple. They've never had much money. What if they really can't afford even the cheapest senior apartment? Mark let out a sigh. Then we help them, but not by letting them live here. That's not the solution. I wanted to believe him, but something gnawed at me. Why had my parents never mentioned any of these options? Why jump straight to moving in with me? The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I called Jake first, asking if he knew anything about their finances. He was evasive, which immediately raised red flags. "Why are you asking me that?" he said. "They're private people. They don't need you snooping around." "Jake," I said firmly, "if they're really going to end up homeless, I need to know what we're dealing with. Do they have savings? Pensions? Debt?" He hesitated, then muttered, "I think they're fine. They've got their pensions. And some other stuff." "Other stuff? Like what?" He clammed up. "I don't know. Look, stop digging, okay? You're just making this worse." Then he hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, heart pounding. Some other stuff. What did that even mean? Later that week, I drove over to my parents' house. Well, their rental apartment. It was a two-bedroom in a worn-down complex, the kind with peeling paint on the doors and mailboxes that looked older than me. I hadn't been there in months, not since the initial fight. When my mom opened the door, she looked genuinely surprised to see me. Her eyes were puffy, like she'd been crying again. My dad was slouched on the couch, TV blaring. "Can we talk?" I asked. She pursed her lips, but stepped aside to let me in. We sat at the dining table, and I didn't bother with small talk. "Mom, do you guys really have no money?" Her eyes flickered. For a moment, I thought she might come clean. But then she launched into the same speech I'd heard a dozen times. "We lived for you kids. We never had the luxury of saving. Every penny went into making sure you had a roof over your head, food on the table, clothes on your back." I cut her off. "Mom, stop. I'm not trying to fight. I just need the truth." Because Jake made it sound like maybe things aren't as bad as you're saying. That got her attention. Her mouth tightened, and she shot a glance toward the living room, where Dad was pretending not to listen. Finally, she sighed. "Fine. We're not broke, but we're not rich either. Your father has his pension. I get Social Security, but rent eats most of it." And we thought, instead of wasting money on rent, why not move in with you? That way, we could all be together, and we wouldn't have to worry. Something about the way she said wasting money made my stomach twist. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "So you do have income, enough to cover basic living expenses. You just don't want to spend it on rent." Her face flushed. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You made it sound like you'd be on the street, like you had no options. But that's not true. You just don't want to live within your means." That's when Dad suddenly barked from the couch. "Why should we live like paupers when you have a house with extra space? What's the point of family if not to take care of each other?" I turned to look at him. "Because it's my house, Dad. Mine and Mark's. Not yours. Not Jake's. You don't get to just claim it." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mom's face hardened. My dad turned up the TV volume. I knew then that I wasn't going to get through to them. They didn't want help. They wanted control. I left their apartment feeling sick. And on the drive home, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Why were you at Mom and Dad's? They said you were interrogating them about money. Leave them alone, or this is going to get ugly." Ugly. That word hit me like a punch. Because deep down, I knew he was right. This was already ugly, and it was about to get a whole lot worse. After Jake's text, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than my parents were letting on. Ugly. He'd said things would get ugly if I kept digging. What exactly were they hiding that was so dangerous to talk about? That week, I went about my routine, work, picking Lily up from daycare, cooking dinner with Mark, but the thought lingered like a shadow in the back of my mind. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected another angry message from Jake or some guilt-soaked voicemail from my mom. Finally, on Friday night, I decided to confide in Mark. We were sitting on the couch after putting Lily to bed, a glass of wine in my hand, the TV murmuring in the background. I told him everything. My visit to my parents' apartment, the way Mom had dodged questions, Dad's outburst, Jake's threatening text. Mark sat quietly, his brows furrowed. When I finished, he said, "This isn't just about them wanting to move in. This feels like a pattern. Manipulation. Control. And now that you're resisting, they're doubling down." I rubbed my temples. But why? If they really have money coming in, why lie? Why act like they're on the verge of homelessness? "Because fear works," Mark said flatly. "They know it makes you vulnerable. They've been training you your whole life to feel guilty. This is just the adult version of it." His words hit hard, because deep down, I knew he was right. Still, something didn't add up. If they had pensions and Social Security, why was rent eating up everything? Their apartment wasn't nice, but it wasn't outrageously expensive either. And if they thought rent was wasting money, why hadn't they looked into senior housing or downsizing years ago? The next day, while Lily was at a play date, I called my Aunt Linda. She's my mom's older sister, and unlike the rest of the family, she's always been more grounded. We don't talk often, but when we do, she tells it like it is. After a few pleasantries, I asked her straight out, "Aunt Linda, do you know anything about Mom and Dad's finances?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then she sighed. "Oh, honey, I was wondering when you'd find out." My heart skipped. "Find out what?" She lowered her voice, like she was afraid my parents might somehow overhear through the phone. "Your parents aren't broke. Far from it. They've made some questionable choices over the years, but they're not destitute. They've got a little nest egg. Investments, savings accounts. Nothing huge, but enough that they could afford their own place if they wanted to. I sat there, stunned. Wait, investments? Savings? They told me they had nothing. Linda gave a bitter laugh. They've been crying poor for decades, but trust me, they're fine. Not rich, but fine. They just don't want to spend it. Your dad's always been cheap, and your mom, well, she likes the idea of being taken care of. It's easier to guilt you than to use their own money. My stomach flipped. All those late-night worries, the guilt, the sleepless nights, were they all for nothing? But why would they lie? I asked, my voice breaking. Why put me through this? Linda's answer was simple. Because they think they're entitled to your life. They plan their retirement around you without ever asking. And now that you're saying no, they'll pull every trick in the book to make you fold. I was quiet for a long time. Listen, Linda added softly, don't let them bully you. You're not wrong for protecting your home. But be prepared. If you stand your ground, they'll escalate. I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling. For the rest of the day, I kept replaying the conversation in my head. The confirmation that my parents weren't helpless victims, but manipulators hit me like a truck. Part of me felt relieved. I wasn't condemning them to homelessness after all. But another part of me felt furious. Betrayed. That night, I told Mark what Linda had said. He wasn't surprised. If anything, he looked almost smug, like he'd suspected it all along. So now what? I asked. Now we don't cave, he said. We draw the line and hold it. They're lying to you, and you can't reward that behavior. I nodded, but inside I was boiling. I couldn't just let this slide. The next time my parents called, I was going to confront them. No more sidestepping. No more guilt games. And when that call came, 2 days later, it didn't go anything like I expected. Because instead of answering my questions, my dad finally lost his temper. And what he said next nearly made me drop the phone. The call came on a Tuesday evening, right after I'd tucked Lily into bed. My phone lit up with Mom and Dad, and I almost didn't answer. But something in me, maybe stubbornness, maybe adrenaline, made me swipe anyway. Hello. My mom's voice came first, sharp and cold. We heard you've been talking to Linda. My heart dropped. Yeah, I did. Because I wanted the truth. There was a long pause. Then my dad's voice cut in, low and thunderous. You had no right to go behind our backs. I gripped the phone tighter. No right. You've been lying to me, Dad. Making me think you were broke. Making me feel like a monster for not taking you in. When in reality, you've got money saved up. Investments. A nest egg. So why? For a moment, there was silence. I thought maybe I'd caught them. But then my dad's temper snapped. Because that money isn't for wasting on rent, he roared. That money is for our future. For family. For you and Jake when we're gone. Do you think we saved all these years just to throw it away on some landlord? I was stunned. My ears were ringing. So let me get this straight. You do have enough to take care of yourselves, but you'd rather hoard it and force me to uproot my life to accommodate you? You make it sound so ugly. My mom cut in, her voice dripping with wounded sweetness. We only wanted to be with you. To live out our years surrounded by family. That's what we always planned. Planned. My voice cracked. You planned your retirement around living in my house. Without ever asking me? My dad scoffed. Of course we did. Where else would we go? You're the eldest. You have the responsibility. Jake's too young, too unstable. You were always the one we invested in. I felt my chest tighten, heat rushing up my neck. Invested in. Like I was some kind of retirement fund. I never agreed to that. I said, my voice shaking. I never promised you my house. You just assumed. And now you're trying to bully me into it. You're ungrateful, Dad snapped. Everything you have is because of us. The roof over your head, the education, the values we gave you. I couldn't hold it in anymore. No, everything I have is because I worked for it. Mark worked for it. You didn't buy me this house. You didn't pay my tuition. I took loans. I paid them back. I built this life myself. And now you think you can just walk in and take over? My mom gasped like I'd stabbed her. How can you talk to us like this? We're your parents. There was a pounding silence, broken only by my dad's heavy breathing on the other end. Then, in a voice that was both cold and terrifyingly calm, he said, if you shut us out, don't expect us to leave you anything when we're gone. Not a cent. Not the house. Nothing. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. What house? Another silence. My mom muttered, Harold, like she was warning him. But he kept going. The house we bought years ago, the one we've been renting out. You didn't think we'd really have nothing, did you? That's where our money's tied up. That's our security. But if you're going to treat us like strangers, then fine. Don't come crying when Jake gets everything and you're cut out. I sat there, stunned. My brain scrambled to process what I'd just heard. A rental property. An entire house. They owned a house this whole time and never said a word? While they'd been hounding me, guilting me, acting like they were destitute. My mouth went dry. You own a house? My dad gave a bitter laugh. Not that it's any of your business. But yes. And you'll never see a dime of it now. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat frozen, phone pressed to my ear long after the call ended. My hands were shaking. My chest felt hollow. When Mark found me in the kitchen a few minutes later, I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost. They own a house, I whispered. A whole house. And they've been lying this entire time. Mark's face hardened. Then it's not about needing you. It's about controlling you. And he was right. But what I didn't know then was that the existence of that house, the rental they'd kept secret, was about to tear the family apart in ways I couldn't have imagined. Because once Jake found out, everything went nuclear. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the conversation with my dad, his voice snarling through the phone. We own a house, but you'll never see a dime of it. How had they kept something so huge hidden from me and Jake all these years? A whole rental property, while claiming they couldn't afford groceries some months, while guilt-tripping me into thinking I owed them everything. By morning, the shock had burned into anger. I needed answers. Mark urged me to wait, to calm down, but I couldn't. My hands were shaking as I dialed Jake's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. What now? I didn't even say hello. Did you know Mom and Dad own a house? There was a pause. Too long of a pause. Then Jake muttered, Oh, they told you. My stomach dropped. So you knew? You knew this whole time and didn't say anything? Jake sighed heavily. It wasn't my place. Not your place. My voice rose. They've been lying to me, lying to both of us. They made me believe they were broke. They tried to guilt me into letting them move in. Meanwhile, they've got a whole other house just sitting there. It's not just sitting there, Jake snapped. It's rented out. It's their retirement income. They didn't want to blow through the savings, so they planned to move in with you and keep the rental money coming in. That's smart, not malicious. Smart. I practically shouted. That's manipulative. They let me think they were desperate. They let the entire family attack me for being selfish while they were hiding assets. That's not smart. That's cruel. Jake's voice hardened. You don't get it. They've been planning this for years. They thought you'd understand, that you'd honor what they've done for us. But instead, you've turned on them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Honor them. By uprooting my life, my marriage, and my daughter's childhood just so they can play landlord and hoard money? Are you even listening to yourself? There was silence. Then Jake said quietly, Maybe that's why they didn't trust you with the truth. You only ever think about yourself. That cut deep. I opened my mouth to argue, but Jake hung up. Just like that. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone, my hands trembling. When I told Mark what had happened, he wasn't surprised. He just shook his head. Jake's in their pocket. He always has been. They're dangling that inheritance in front of him, and he'll defend them no matter what. And he was right. Because later that day, Jake sent me a long text that made my stomach churn. Since you've made it clear you want nothing to do with Mom and Dad, I'll take responsibility. They can move in with me when their lease ends. Don't worry. You won't have to sacrifice anything. But don't expect to be part of the family anymore. You've made your choice. I stared at the screen, rage and hurt crashing over me in waves. Jake lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment. There was no way he could actually take them in. But that wasn't the point. He was making a statement. Choosing sides. Drawing a line in the sand. And I realized then that this wasn't just about housing anymore. This was about loyalty. About control. About who was willing to play by my parents' rules, and who wasn't. Over the next few weeks, things spiraled. My parents stopped calling me entirely. Instead, they communicated through Jake. Invitations to family dinners excluded me, but not Mark or Lily, just me. Relatives sent passive-aggressive messages about how sad it was that I'd abandoned the people who raised me. Even Linda, the one person who'd been honest, called to warn me. They're rewriting the story, she said. They're painting you as the villain to justify what they're doing. And they're promising Jake everything. The house, the savings, all of it. You need to be ready. I laughed bitterly. Ready for what? I already lost them. But she was right. Something was coming. I found out a week later, when a letter showed up in my mailbox, handwritten in my dad's neat, rigid script. I unfolded it with trembling hands, and as my eyes scanned the words, my heart sank. Because it wasn't just a letter. It was a formal declaration. They were cutting me off. The envelope was thin, but it felt heavy in my hands. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letter for what felt like forever before finally forcing myself to read it. It began with my mom's handwriting, looping and dramatic. We never thought we'd have to write something like this. But since you've turned your back on us, we feel we have no choice. I skimmed further down, my pulse pounding in my ears. They wrote about how disappointed they were in me, how family is supposed to stick together, how they had planned for years to spend their retirement in my home, and how I had destroyed that dream. Then the letter shifted into my dad's handwriting, every word rigid and sharp. Since you've made it clear you want no part in this family's future, you will not be included in our will. The house, our savings, and our belongings will be left to Jake, who has shown loyalty and respect. Consider this our final word on the matter. By the time I reached the end, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the paper. Mark came in from the living room, saw my face, and immediately crouched beside me. What is it? I handed him the letter. He read it silently, jaw tightening with every line. When he finished, he set it down like it was something dirty. Unbelievable, he muttered. They're disowning you. Over this. I swallowed hard. It's not just me. They're cutting Lily out too. Their granddaughter. Because I wouldn't let them move in. The thought made my chest ache. Lily was too young to understand any of this, but someday she'd notice the absence. No birthday cards from her grandparents. No visits. Just nothing. Mark put his hand over mine. Listen to me. This isn't your fault. They made this choice. Not you. But even as he said it, I couldn't stop the guilt. I imagined family holidays with empty chairs. I imagined Lily asking why Grandma and Grandpa didn't come around anymore. What would I even say? The next few days blurred together. I tried to focus on work, on Lily, on normal life, but the letter burned in my mind like a brand. And the silence from my parents was deafening. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Jake called. His voice was smug, almost gloating. So you got the letter, huh? I clenched my jaw. You knew about it? Of course I did, he said. They showed it to me before they sent it. Honestly, it's for the best. At least now things are clear. You made your choice, and they made theirs. My blood boiled. You think this is fair? Cutting me and Lily out of their lives just because I set boundaries? Jake laughed. Boundaries? Is that what you call abandoning your parents? Look, I'm not going to argue with you. The bottom line is, I'll be the one taking care of them. I'll inherit the house. And you? You'll just have to live with the fact that you turned your back on family. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Jake, you can't even afford to take them in. You live in a shoebox. How are you going to handle it when they start demanding more from you? His voice dropped, cold and sharp. I'd rather struggle with them than betray them. Unlike you. And then he hung up. I sat there, shaking with rage, tears stinging my eyes. When Mark saw me, he pulled me into his arms. I buried my face in his shoulder, muffling the words that tore out of me. They've erased me. Like I don't even exist anymore. He stroked my hair, whispering, then we build our own family, our own future, without them. But as comforting as that sounded, it didn't erase the hollow pit in my chest. Because as much as I wanted to let go, a part of me couldn't. A part of me still longed for their approval, their love, even though I knew I'd probably never get it. And then, 2 weeks later, just as I was starting to accept the silence, I got another letter. This one wasn't from my parents. It was from a lawyer. The envelope looked official, thick paper, my name typed neatly across the front, a return address from a law office downtown. My stomach dropped the second I saw it. I tore it open with shaky hands, pulled out a neatly stapled packet, and began to read. At first, the legal language was so dense I could barely process it. But one sentence jumped out at me. This letter serves as notice that your parents, Harold and Susan, have formally amended their estate planning documents, removing you and your descendants as beneficiaries. I read it 3 times before the words sank in. They hadn't just written me a dramatic letter in anger. They'd gone to an actual lawyer. They'd made it legal. The rest of the packet was full of details about the transfer of assets, all of it now directed solely to Jake. The house, their savings. Even small personal possessions were mentioned, things like jewelry, family heirlooms, photographs. By the time I got to the last page, my hands were trembling. Mark came in from the backyard, where he'd been playing with Lily, and saw me pale and frozen at the kitchen table. "What is it?" I slid the papers toward him. They weren't bluffing. He scanned them quickly, his jaw tightening. "They actually went through with it. They cut you out." I nodded numbly. "Not just me. Lily too. They made it official." The sound of Lily's laughter floated in from outside, light and innocent. And that's when the anger finally broke through the numbness. "They erased her," I whispered. "Their granddaughter. Because of me." Mark sat down across from me, his eyes steady. "No. Because of them. They made that choice. Don't put this on yourself." But it was impossible not to. I thought about the photo albums full of Lily as a baby, the way my mom had cried the first time she held her, the way my dad used to say, "That kid's got fire in her, just like her mom." And now, they were pretending she didn't even exist. That night, after Lily was asleep, I called Linda. I read her part of the letter, my voice shaking with fury. She sighed heavily. I knew they were serious, but I didn't think they'd actually go through the courts. "They're doubling down." "Why?" I demanded. "Why go this far? Why destroy everything over this?" Linda's voice was soft. "Because they can't stand being told no. And cutting you out isn't just about money. It's about punishment. They want to make an example of you, to show the rest of the family what happens when you don't fall in line." Her words made me cold all over. She added, "Listen, honey, this isn't really about inheritance. It's about control. They're trying to scare you into crawling back. If you beg, maybe they'll reverse it. That's how they operate." I gripped the phone tighter. "Well, I'm not begging. I'm done being manipulated." But even as I said it, a lump formed in my throat. Because deep down, a part of me wondered if that was exactly what they were waiting for. Me to break, to call them in tears, to say, "Fine, move in, just don't erase me." Over the next week, the pressure only grew. Jake sent me smug little messages, things like, "You made your bed, now lie in it." "Guess who's helping mom and dad look at new furniture for their house?" "That's right, me." "Lily won't even remember them. So what's the big deal?" I wanted to block him, but part of me couldn't look away. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Mark tried to pull me back into our own life, reminding me that we had enough, that we didn't need their money or approval. And he was right. But late at night, when the house was quiet, I lay awake thinking about all the family history, the connections, the love I thought we had, now poisoned. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, I got a text from my mom. It said, "We've made our decision, but if you want to come talk face to face, we'll listen. One last chance." I stared at it for a long time, my heart racing. Was this an olive branch? A trap? A final test? Mark told me not to go. They'll just try to twist it, guilt you, corner you. Don't give them that power. But part of me needed to see them, needed to hear it straight, in person. So a few days later, I drove to their rental apartment. I didn't know it then, but that visit would change everything. Because what I walked into wasn't a reconciliation. It was an ambush. The "one last chance" text sat on my screen for 2 nights before I answered. Mark kept saying, "You don't have to go," and I kept nodding, pretending I'd listen, pretending I could ignore the itch under my skin that said see it through. I don't know if it was hope or compulsion, but by the 3rd morning I'd picked a sweater that didn't show sweat and drove across town with my stomach climbing into my throat. Their complex looked the same as always, sun-faded numbers, a dead shrub in a cracked planter, the hum of an old air unit rattling like a loose tooth. I walked up the exterior stairs that still smelled faintly like bleach from some overworked maintenance guy doing his best. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Dad stood there like a guard, feet planted, jaw set. He didn't say hello. He just stepped back. Inside, the table was cleared of its usual stack of supermarket flyers and crossword books. In their place sat a neat blue folder, a yellow legal pad, and 2 pins aligned like a little ceremony. Mom was dressed up, lipstick, hair smoothed, the pearl earrings she saved for weddings, graduations, and fights she wanted to win. She smiled at me like I was a customer, and she was here to provide a service. "Tea?" she asked, already pouring. The kettle, dented and old, hissed like it was offended to be involved. "I'm fine," I said, and my voice came out smaller than I wanted. I sat. My fingers found the seam on the underside of the chair and held on. Dad stayed standing. He had a way of looming, like he believed altitude won arguments. "We appreciate you coming," he said. "This is a conversation that should have happened a long time ago." "I thought we had it months ago," I said. "When I said you can't move in." Mom's smile didn't move. "Sweetheart, we all said things in anger. We wanted to give you a chance to correct the misunderstanding." There wasn't a misunderstanding. My hands were warmer than they should have been. "You planned to live with me without asking. You had assets. You cut me out of your will to punish me when I said no. I understood perfectly." Dad's mouth pressed into a line. He slid the blue folder toward me with 2 fingers. "We had to take steps because you forced our hand. This," he tapped the folder, "is our attempt to make the best of a bad situation. Open it." The paper smelled faintly like toner and lemon cleaner. The first page was a letter typed in my dad's voice, formal, clipped. "We love you. We wish to remain a family. We propose the following arrangement." I flipped the page and felt the edges bite into my fingertips. It was a plan, not a conversation. A plan. A family cohabitation agreement. 3 pages long, bullet points with bold headers like it was a business merger. Bedroom allocations. Former office to be cleared for parental use. Timeline. Immediate, within 30 days. Shared resource schedule. Laundry days, Mon, Wed Friday. Car usage, Tuesday/Thursday errands. Kitchen prime time, 5 to 7 p.m. reserved for parental meal prep. Financial considerations. Parents contribute utilities at 20% rate. Homeowner, me, to cover all mortgage, maintenance, and groceries. Grandchild enrichment. Parents to provide daily care from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Parents to have decision input on schooling, diet, discipline. Privacy and communication. Weekly family meetings Sunday 6 p.m. Grievances addressed with respect. Emergency clause. In case of illness, homeowner to provide transport, assist with medications. And at the bottom, 2 signature lines, mine and Mark's. My eyes kept snagging on phrases like access to homeowner's vehicle and keys to be distributed to parents and brother for family convenience. The more I read, the colder the back of my neck felt. It wasn't a compromise. It was a takeover, written in polite fonts. "This isn't an agreement," I said quietly. "This is you moving in and running our house." Mom's smile frayed. "It's structure, dear. You always do better with structure." "I'm 32, not 12, I said. "I make the structure in my house." Dad nodded once, like he'd expected my defiance and planned to counter. "You have a child. You both work. You need help, even if you don't admit it. We are offering that help. The terms are reasonable." "Terms," I repeated, hearing my voice wobble. "Like you're my landlord? Why is car usage in here? Why is Jake listed to have a key?" "Family convenience," Dad said. "He'll be the one helping us with appointments if you're too busy." "He doesn't even live near us," I said. "He will," Mom said, like she was confessing a fun surprise. "He's looking at apartments on your side of town. It'll be so nice to have everyone close." I stared at them. The kettle clicked in the kitchen, done with its hiss. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor's TV audience laughed at a joke I couldn't hear. My skin felt too tight. "You're not listening," I said. "You're planning my life while I'm sitting here saying no." Dad finally sat, elbows on the table, hands steepled like a manager about to deliver bad news. "You've had your little independence. Now it's time to act like the eldest child. Responsibility isn't convenient. Sign it, and we'll go to the lawyer next week and undo the will changes. We'll even add a clause to protect Lily. That is, if you show you can be trusted." I laughed, a short broken sound I didn't recognize. "Trusted? You lied to me. You own a rental house. You made me think you had nothing. You rallied the family to shame me. And now you're offering to reward me if I obey." Mom's eyes flashed, then softened like she remembered which mask to wear. "We were scared," she said. "We've worked so hard, and the world is so expensive, and we didn't want to waste what we saved. We thought you'd be happy to have us. We thought you'd feel honored. Honored to lose my office, share my car, and have my parenting decisions reviewed." I swallowed. "Honored to rebuild my life around your schedule." "The office is a bedroom," Dad said. "It should always have been a bedroom. And a car is a tool for the family, not a trophy." "I need my office," I said. "It's how I work from home. It's how I pay the bills." "Then work at the dining table like your mother did," he snapped. You young people think everything needs to be custom. I looked down at the neat bullet points that were supposed to fix us, and the words blurred for a second. I'm not signing, I said. You can't live with us. I won't agree to this. Mom's mouth made a small O. For a heartbeat, real hurt flashed there, like a fish darting in shallow water. Then it was gone, replaced by chilly resolve. I didn't want to do this, she said, and when she reached into the folder again I braced, stupidly expecting another typed page. Instead, she took out a small silver key on a faded floral keychain, the one I'd given her 2 years ago for emergencies after Lily was born. The key glinted in her palm like a coin. You shouldn't have needed to come, she said. We already have what we need. My throat went dry. Give that back. She closed her fist. We will, once we move in. Dad's voice returned to that calm, managerial tone. We gave notice to our landlord. Our lease ends at the end of the month. We have the movers scheduled for Saturday the 28th at 9 in the morning. We'll arrive at your house around 10. You and Mark can be ready to show us where to put the boxes. The room tilted slightly, and I had to put my hand flat on the table to keep my voice steady. You gave notice? Without asking me? We can't live in limbo, Dad said. We assumed you'd be reasonable once you cooled off. The family expects it. Jake expects it. A knock on the door made all three of us flinch. For a second I thought it was a neighbor, or worse, a process server with some new invention to box me in. Dad walked to the door and opened it. Jake stood there, cheeks flushed from the cold or the climb, hair damp like he'd rushed. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked rehearsed. Good, he said, stepping inside without waiting. We're doing this as a family. He dropped into the only empty chair and folded his arms. I'll be there with the movers, he said. I've already put in for the day off. I told them I'm helping my parents move into my sister's place. Everyone at work thought it was sweet. He smiled at me, not with warmth, but with victory. Don't embarrass yourself by making a scene. You don't even have space for them at your apartment, I said, trying not to let my voice shake. But somehow you're arranging my house. Jake leaned forward. You chose to be difficult. This is the consequence. If you lock the door, we'll call the police and explain you're denying your parents access to their own family home. Do you want Lily to see that? Do you want her to watch you turn her grandparents away? Mom tooted softly. No one wants police. That would be so sad. I stared at the key in her hand. A hot, heavy rage crawled up my ribs like ivy. Give me the key, I said again. That was for emergencies. For fires. For the time I locked myself out with the stroller and you had to drive over. It wasn't so you could plan a hostile takeover. Mom's chin trembled, but her fingers didn't open. We are the emergency, she said. We are your parents. I stood. My knees wobbled, but I kept my voice as even as I could. I'm leaving now. I won't sign anything. You are not moving into my house. If you show up with a truck, you'll find the locks changed. Jake snorted. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I said. Dad's voice turned quiet in the way that always meant something sharp. If you make us homeless, he said, every person in this family will know it was you. We will tell them, you turned us away with our boxes on the lawn. They will remember. I took a breath that shuddered in my chest. They already think the worst, I said. I can live with it. I can't live with this. I moved toward the door. Mom's chair scraped against the linoleum as she stood, the pearl earrings catching the light. Last chance, she said. Sign, and we'll forgive this ugliness. You'll be back in the will. Lily will have grandparents. Or walk out and make your choice permanent. I looked at her. In the lipstick she put on when she wanted to be formidable, in the sweater I remembered from Christmas dinners where she controlled the seating chart and the desserts and the conversation. She really believed those papers could bind me to her idea of family. She really believed the key made my home hers by default. I already made my choice, I said, and walked out. On the landing, my legs went soft for a second, and I had to grip the rail. I made it to the car on muscle memory. When I shut the door, the world went quiet in that padded way it does inside a vehicle, like you've stepped into a little capsule where your heartbeat is the only sound. I didn't start the engine. I called Mark. Tell me you didn't sign anything, he said before I could speak. I didn't, I said. They have a schedule. They gave notice. They're coming on the 28th. And they still have our key. He swore under his breath, a word we don't say around Lily. Okay, we'll call a locksmith today. We'll get cameras set up. I'll talk to Trevor next door. He's always out front on weekends. And I'll call a lawyer. We're not playing this on their terms. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. They think if they show up with a truck, I'll fold. Then we won't be there to fold, he said. We'll be there to say no properly. When I finally turned the ignition, my hands had stopped shaking. The car filled with the warm air of the heater, and a part of me that had been 12 years old for 30 minutes stood up and stretched its legs. I drove home on quieter streets, eyes catching every billboard and bus stop ad like the city had suddenly turned the volume down. At a red light, I checked my phone. One new message from Jake. Movers confirmed. Saturday the 28th, 9 a.m. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. I took a screenshot and sent it to Mark, then to Linda with a short, FYI they plan to show up. Please don't come. She replied with 3 dots for a long time, and then, I'll stay out of it, but I'm here if you need me. I'm sorry, honey. That night we ate pasta and watched a cartoon with Lily and laughed at the silliest parts because we needed to hear ourselves laugh. After she went to bed, Mark pulled our spare key hook off the wall and stowed it in a drawer. Locksmith tomorrow, he said. Doorbell camera too. We'll keep it calm and boring and firm. The week crawled and sprinted at the same time. I went to work and answered emails and pretended my chest wasn't a drum. I found myself watching the neighbors' morning routines through the kitchen window like they were a cozy show. On Wednesday, the locksmith came. He was a kindly man with a white mustache who told me a story about a raccoon that learned to open his shed. He didn't ask why I was changing all 3 locks, and I didn't explain. When he left, I held the smooth new keys in my palm like cool stones. On Thursday, Mark printed a short letter we had a lawyer friend help us word. It said, simply, we love you. You may not move into our home. Do not bring your possessions here. We will help you research other housing. Any arrival without invitation will be considered trespass, and we will contact authorities. Please correspond in writing. It felt dramatic, but also like a seatbelt, tighter than you want, but right. Friday night, I folded laundry like it would keep my hands busy enough to quiet my brain. Somewhere around 9, a text buzzed. From Mom, we're leaving early to beat traffic. See you in the morning, sweetheart. We'll bring pastries. My hands went cold. Saturday dawned clear and bright, the kind of blue that makes you want to stand on the porch with coffee. I didn't sleep much. I put Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit in her backpack and kissed her forehead as she headed out with our sitter to the library for story time, and then the park. I couldn't have her here for any of this. Mark stood beside me on the porch for a minute in the cold light, our breath little ghosts. At 8:57, the group chat lit up, Aunt Karen with a gold heart emoji, a cousin with so excited for the big family day. The script had been sent out. The audience was seated. At 9:41, a text from Jake. On schedule. 20 minutes out. Mark looked at me, eyebrows raised. I nodded. We moved through the house once, quietly, like we were checking exits in a building. At 10:01, long before I saw anything, I heard it. The low diesel growl rolling up our street. The sound filled my chest cavity like fog. I stood at the front window and watched the white box truck glide into view, right move in blue cursive on the side. Behind it, Dad's sedan. Behind that, Jake's little car. I could see Mom in the passenger seat with a pastry box on her lap, like she was arriving for brunch. They parked along the curb like guests. The truck door rattled up. 2 movers jumped down in matching shirts, efficient and bored, like any other Saturday. Then came the first thud on my front door. 3 solid knocks that made the glass in the frame tremble. I took a breath and reached for the handle. The new lock was cool under my palm, and I opened the door. When I opened the door, my dad was standing there with his arms crossed, 2 movers waiting behind him with boxes. My mom hovered just off the porch, clutching that pastry box like it was her ticket inside. Jake leaned against the car with his phone out, already recording. The sight of him filming made my stomach drop. They weren't here to move in quietly. They were here to stage a scene. Morning, Dad said briskly, like this was just business. We'll start with the kitchen boxes. I held the door frame, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. No, you're not moving in. The locks have been changed. You need to leave. His eyes narrowed. We gave notice on our lease. We have nowhere else to go. You had noticed that you're not welcome here, I said firmly. We even put it in writing. This is trespassing. Jake scoffed loudly, angling his phone to catch my face. Listen to her, kicking her own parents out on the street. Everyone's going to see what kind of person you really are. Mark stepped up beside me, calm but steady. He held the letter we'd printed, folded neatly. We're not arguing. Here's the written notice again. You can take it with you, but you're not coming inside. One of the movers scratched his head. Do you guys actually live here? No, I said quickly. They don't. My husband and I own this house. They're not moving in. The movers exchanged a look. They'd clearly been told a different story. One muttered, "Yeah, we're not touching this," and backed toward the truck. My mom's face crumpled. "Sweetheart, please. Don't do this. Think of Lily. She needs her grandparents." I felt tears sting my eyes, but I didn't waver. She needs parents who protect her home, who show her that love isn't control. This isn't about Lily. This is about you wanting power. Dad's jaw clenched, and for a second, I thought he'd push past me. But when Mark calmly pulled his phone from his pocket and said, "We'll call the police if you don't leave," something flickered in his eyes. He wasn't expecting us to be ready. Jake muttered curses under his breath and shut off his recording, realizing there'd be no dramatic footage to post to the family group chat. My mom held onto that pastry box like it was the last piece of her dignity. Finally, Dad snapped, "Fine. You made your choice. Don't call us when you regret it." They turned, trudging back to their cars. The movers, relieved, shut the truck and drove off without even saying goodbye. When the last car disappeared down the street, I realized my hands were shaking so hard I could barely close the door. Mark pulled me into a hug. "It's over," he whispered. And for the first time, I believed him. It's been 6 months since that day. We never heard from my parents again, not directly. The family group chat exploded with accusations and twisted stories, but after a while, even that went quiet. Jake moved closer to them, just like they wanted. They still have their rental house. They still have their savings. They just don't have me. Sometimes it still hurts. Sometimes I lie awake wondering if I should have caved, if keeping some connection was better than cutting them out. But then I think about Lily's laughter echoing through a house that's ours, about the peace of knowing no one can walk through our door with a spare key and a plan. And I remember the moment I said no, the moment I chose us over them. The cycle ends here.